No, 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 no.
Sorry, is there something wrong?
It's just that bottle. Could you go back and pick it up?
Sorry, love. It's gone now.
Pick it up. I said, pick it up. Pick it up!
This is the last in a short series of short videos reflecting on the surprisingly short-lived era of Disney Doctor Who that many feel has become quite the case study into a phenomenon often referred to as get woke, go broke. Over the series I've utilised the BBC's own DEI measurement metrics to consider some of Disney Doctor Who's shortcomings when it comes to consistent and inclusive messaging about protected personal characteristics shared by many of its viewers. To date, we've looked at disability, race, sexual orientation, and sex, as well as trying to make sense of the apparent anti-Israeli messaging that featured prominently in an episode broadcast in the same week that the BBC's highest paid employee left the corporation under a cloud of accusations of anti-Semitism. And although this really shouldn't have to be said, like most rational and reasonably minded people, I tend to take an entirely non-binary approach to most matters, which in this case means that while I wholeheartedly support the BBC's commitment to diversity, equality and inclusion, I also believe that it's entirely reasonable to comment on outcomes arising from their approach and point to potential areas for improvement. And what's more, I sincerely believe that people should have the human right to voice their personal opinions without having to navigate childish chill factors created by self-appointed gatekeepers seeking to coercively control or shut down open adult discourse by inferring that anyone who doesn't think like them must be an istphobe or worse.
These guys will commit terrorism, and that's not even a joke, that's just a demonstrable fact.
And so I thought I would bring this series to some sort of conclusion with the help of a case study considering the 50-plus year evolving recruitment practices of the Unified Intelligence Task Force, in the context of the BBC's own equality guidelines, and the popular perception that Disney Doctor Who was aimed at 12-year-old girls.
It's no longer a family show about space and time travel. It's aimed at 12-year-old girls, but watched by a declining number of people over the age of 40. If Doctor Who is dying, it's because the BBC has killed it.
We all have similarities and differences. This is a positive thing. But sometimes these differences can lead to discrimination. Discrimination is when someone is treated differently or unfairly for being who they are or for a particular quality or feature they might have.
And it's bad because doesn't that mean that you're different to them? So you could just swap it around and then they could just do the same thing back to you.
We all have the same rights as citizens.
Nobody should get treated less equally because of their differences.
It might make other people sad and like no one cares about them, and everyone should feel loved. And at the end of the day, we're all citizens, we're all humans, we're all the same.
To help take action against discrimination, the UK government has introduced laws and rules that protect people. One example of this is the Equality Act, introduced in 2010, and it protects you from being treated unfairly because of things such as disability, gender, or race, for example. We all have rights to be protected and treated the same way as everyone else.
For the uninitiated, under the Equality Act 2010, direct discrimination occurs when a person treats someone less favourably than they treat others, specifically because of a protected characteristic such as their sex. And the historical recruitment practices of UNIT present us with a clear example of the type of carry-on that 21st century BBC executives urge their staff to avoid. Because back in the 1970s, the rank, file and leadership of UNIT all reflected the real-life recruitment practices of the time, when women were barred from combat roles in the British Armed Forces. This is an example of direct discrimination, which in UK law occurs when a person treats someone less favourably than they treat others, specifically because of a protected characteristic, such as their sex. In the real world, this ban largely held until 2016, but happily, on screen, units have actually been something of a trailblazer. For starters, and since as far back as 1963, they have promoted plenty of positive examples of women working in STEM fields, and indeed, to this day, the very vast majority of their scientific officers have been female. And by 1989, women had been serving in their combat ranks long enough for Brigadier Winifred Bambera to become their first female head, followed in the early noughties by General Muriel Frost and Captain Magambo in 2010. Based on all of the available evidence, we can assume that all three women secured their leadership roles solely on the basis of merit, as opposed to any sort of positive discrimination. In UK law, positive discrimination can be defined as any practice of favouring individuals, primarily because they belong to groups, regarded as disadvantaged or subject to discrimination. And as any competent equality, diversity and inclusion practitioner will tell you, with a few limited exceptions, positive discrimination has been positively illegal in the United Kingdom for over 50 years. All of which brings us to the slightly more nuanced concept of indirect discrimination, which can occur when an employer applies an apparently neutral practice which in actuality disadvantages some people with a protected characteristic. This is an area where modern day units appear to have left themselves extremely vulnerable to potential complaints from their rank and file due to dubious hiring practices that have by now been documented over a number of years.
Didn't you get your invite? So maybe this is where we share stories about the dog.
I will also say I may want to recruit you for some work.
Because by now, while contemporary rank and file positions appear to be relatively diverse, the same can't be said for the more senior and plum premium appointments, recruited directly by Commander Stewart herself.
That was very good work with the music.
Oh.
If we survive this, you should think about joining UNIT.
How much per year?
60,000.
120 plus 5 weeks holiday.
Done.
Incidentally, Commander Catherine Stewart dropped her famous father's Lethbridge from her surname to avoid any perception of nepotism, which is a practice defined as occurring among those with power or influence, who favour relatives, friends or associates, especially by giving them jobs. Commander Stewart has been seen to recruit no less than 7 of the Doctor's former companions through informal word-of-mouth methods, something which the Equality Act Employment Code of Practice strongly advises against. This is because, however unintentionally, such an approach could evolve into a form of indirect discrimination, a type of discrimination that can significantly disadvantage certain types of people based on certain types of protected characteristics, such as race or sex. And it does seem at least past remarkable to notice that over the lifetime of the universe, white male representation in senior unit positions has dropped by something relatively close to 100%. As I highlighted in a previous presentation, across this short lifetime of Disney-era Doctor Who, white men, and straight white men in particular, were more likely to be portrayed as literal monsters than in any particular positive light. But never mind them, and instead let's consider the implications that Commander Stewart's approach may have for the potential promotional prospects of hard-working unit rank and file from black, Asian or ethnic minority backgrounds, such as Corporal Sullivan or Colonels Chan and Singh, who, despite all gaining valuable frontline experience of combating extraterrestrial entities, have been excluded from the sort of high-status roles that Kate appears to have ring-fenced exclusively for a small pool of external candidates with no military training, including a former temporary admin assistant and her 16-year-old daughter who has some limited part-time experience in online sales. And as the evidence shows us, Commander Stewart has been consciously drawing directly from a pool of companion candidates, predominantly populated by people with similar characteristics to herself, leading to an outcome where all 7 of her personal appointments to date just so happen to have been female, and with one mixed-race Nepo baby exception, they've also all been white. Indeed, the only other person from an ethnic minority background we see acting in a senior specialist position is Colonel Ibrahim, and his interpersonal circumstances may in fact hinder units' position further, because possible perceptions of nepotism is one of a number of reasons why the UK military maintains strict rules against fraternisation, especially by those in positions of power. And while we don't know exactly how Senior Scientific Officer Shirley Ann Bingham was recruited, her appointment establishes that being a prior companion of the Doctor is definitely not an essential criteria for the job, all of which presents a perception that Kate the Nepo baby pulled the ladder up behind her, and that some of her rank and file may have a pretty robust cause for complaint to take to an employment tribunal. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the BBC promote much more equality law compliant practices, with their recruitment policy asserting that vacancies should be filled via a competitive selection process using fair and robust job related criteria, and that hiring managers must undertake appropriate training prior to any involvement in recruitment. The sort of training that presumably explains that the three aforementioned types of discrimination have been illegal since the 1970s, and that the BBC's current diversity goals are targets to aspire to, not quotas to be filled. Anyway, the main point I'm attempting to make with this case study is that, assuming we give Commander Stewart the benefit of the doubt, and assume that she's definitely not racist or sexist for that matter, it is still possible to point to a significant amount of evidence showing that, however unintentional, one outcome of her actions is systemic disadvantage or indirect discrimination, negatively impacting on people with different personal characteristics to her. And in the same way, even if we weld ourselves entirely to the assumption that everyone involved in creating Disney Doctor Who has acted in a manner entirely supportive of the BBC's corporate commitments to combating discrimination, championing equality and promoting diversity and inclusion, it still remains possible to point to evidence showing that they haven't been entirely successful in their aim. By way of example, around the time of the era's final episode, a segment of the BBC's own TV review show went viral after all three of its presenters broadly agreed with one audience member's assertion that Doctor Who has become an intolerant programme condemning most of its viewers simply for existing, and has literally become a bunch of memes telling us that straight white men are the source of all evil in the universe.
I've come in and said exactly the same thing as Andy. So he's not imagining it. He's not alone. And, you know,
I mean, he kind of is imagining it. I don't think he is alone, but this is essentially some sort of collective schizophrenia, where it is some sort of weird mental illness that is a prerequisite for their political positions. We need to call this what this is, folks. This is mental illness.
Alternative perspectives remain available, obviously, but now that Laurie Penny has officially called time on the culture war, and one of the most celebrated roles in television has become a poisoned chalice, when considering the future of their 60-plus-year-old cash cow, Suits and Broadcasting House could do well to reflect on why Andy's perspective is an entirely reasonable, legitimate, and not uncommon point of view.
Because this is a mass appeal show, has to appeal to all sides of the argument. You can't just be the left-wing show or the right-wing show. You can't. You've got to appeal to everything. So the Doctor is simultaneously a complete pacifist, absolutely against war, and works for a military organisation. The Doctor is a habitual revolutionary who's very clear that he's in charge. He can style himself a man of the people all he wants in his sort of hippie John Pertwee way, but he is really expecting someone to get him tea. He's always starting a fight. He's frankly, he's a peace-loving man who wanders the universe looking for trouble.